The film starts in 1981 with Chris, who's walking through the streets of San Francisco with his son Christopher. He's taking Christopher to the daycare center, and the kid is talking about what he wants for his next birthday. After dropping his son at the daycare, Chris asks the owner to correct the spelling of happiness, since it's been spelled incorrectly with a Y on the wall of the building. Now, Chris is a salesman who carries a giant portable bone density scanner with him to different clinics in order to sell them. After getting rejected by one doctor, he meets up with his wife Linda at her workplace and asks her to pick up Christopher since he has to go to a different city. It's clear that Linda doesn't like his request, but she has no choice. Chris goes to another clinic, but even there the doctor says he doesn't need his device. To make things worse, his car also gets towed by the police because he hasn't paid his parking tickets in a while. The reason behind this is simple. Chris is struggling financially since no one really wants to buy his machines. That night, after finishing dinner, he notices the Rubik's Cube sitting on the counter. Linda brought it for their son, and he tries to ask her about it, but she's in a foul mood because she's been working double shifts, while Chris hasn't earned anything in months. Chris spends the night trying to solve the Rubik's Cube, but he only manages to solve one side. The next morning, he's going to work when he notices a man getting out of a flashy car. Chris learns that the guy is actually a stockbroker, who tells Chris that he only needs to be good with people to be a good stockbroker. Chris is envious of these stockbrokers since they all look happy, which is something Chris hasn't been in a while. The next morning, he tells Linda that he's going to apply to a brokerage firm, but she tells him to focus on selling the machines so they can pay their bills. Chris doesn't like her attitude, but she's only telling the truth. Still, he stops by the brokerage firm that evening to apply for an internship program. He doesn't want to bring his machine inside, so he leaves it with a hippie girl. He soon realizes his mistake when he notices the girl running away with the scanner. He runs after her, but she gets into a train before he can catch her. With a heavy heart and the job application in his hands, Chris rides the train back home. The next morning while having breakfast, he learns that so far only one guy has been able to solve the cube in less than 30 minutes, and the guy was actually a math professor. After that, he grabs another machine and starts walking to drop Christopher off at the daycare. On their way, Christopher tells his dad that he watches TV shows instead of studying at the daycare. This obviously concerns Chris, and he talks to the daycare lady about it, but she tells Chris to take his son elsewhere if he doesn't like it. Disappointed with this response, Chris goes to the investment firm to meet with Jay, who runs the training program. He manages to personally give his application to Jay, but he doesn't get the response he was looking for. After that, he's booking an appointment with a doctor when he notices the same girl walking around with his machine. Chris is furious because he spent his entire life savings buying those machines, which were supposed to make him and Linda rich. Each of these scanners costs a lot of money, and if he loses any of them, he won't be able to buy groceries for his family. He runs like a madman through the busy street and eventually catches up to the girl. He's angry, but he doesn't get violent and just grabs the machine from her. When he comes home that evening, Linda is visibly annoyed that he hasn't managed to sell any more scanners. She tries to stay calm because they're celebrating Christopher's birthday, but when Chris tries to talk to her, she tells him that she doesn't think that he can provide for his family anymore. It's clear that Chris needs to do something about his financial situation. So the next day, he stops Jay outside his office. He wants to have a chat, but Jay is going home, so Chris decides to share a cab with him. On their way, Chris tries to explain that he is a capable worker, but Jay is engrossed in trying to solve a Rubik's Cube. He believes that it can't be solved, but Chris tells him that he can solve it before they reach his house. Jay doesn't believe him, but then Chris grabs the cube and starts solving it as fast as possible. Jay is then dumbstruck after Chris manages to solve it in a matter of a few minutes. He is impressed, but he gets out of the cab without saying anything else. This is when Chris realizes that Jay didn't pay the cab fare, and he clearly doesn't have the money to cover it. So when the cab stops at a crossing, he grabs his things and makes a run for it. The driver tries to stop him, but Chris leaves him behind and runs into a train station. The driver is still after him, so he has no choice but to jump onto a train. However, he loses his machine at the station, and he is mad about it. Later on, he tries to call Linda and tell her why he's late, but she tells him that she's leaving home with their son. Chris is infuriated by this, and he gets on the bus to get home ASAP, but Linda has already left. While he's sitting and thinking about it, he gets a call from Jay, who wants him to come in for an interview. He gives Chris his secretary's phone number, and Chris runs to a nearby convenience store to write it down. The next morning, he stops Linda in the middle of the street and tells her that she is free to leave him, but Christopher will stay with him. After this argument, he goes to the daycare and takes his son out of there. At night, they're having dinner when the landlord knocks at the door. He tells Chris that since he's 3 months behind on rent, they'll have to move out in a couple of weeks, and Chris will also have to paint the apartment before he leaves. So the next morning, Chris is busy painting the apartment, and this is when the cops come into his place and tell him that he's under arrest for not paying his parking tickets. At the police station, Chris has no choice but to write a check to pay for the tickets, but unfortunately, he can't leave the station before the next morning. Chris tries to tell him that he has an interview at 10:15 the next day, and that he also has to be back home for his son, but the cops don't care. Eventually, he calls Linda and tells her to take care of Christopher for the night, while he sleeps inside of a holding cell. The next morning, he literally has to run to Jay's office from the police station. He is disheveled and isn't even wearing a shirt, but he still waits outside patiently for his interview. When he goes inside, everyone is surprised at the way he's dressed. However, Chris quickly tells them about the unfortunate scenario which led him to coming in like that. He also tells them that even though he never went to college, he's a hard worker, and he'll learn faster than anybody else. Some of the partners are concerned about hiring him, but when he makes them laugh, they change their minds, and Chris gets hired. Still, he isn't sure about joining the program, because it doesn't pay for 6 months, and he might not even get a permanent job at the end of it. After the interview, he goes home and paints the rest of the apartment. He then waits patiently for Linda to bring his son. Eventually, she brings him home while he's asleep. She tells Chris that she's moving to New York for work. She wants to take her son along, but they both know that she isn't capable of taking care of him, so she agrees to leave Christopher in his dad's care. After Linda leaves, Chris decides he's gonna change his circumstances for good. He calls Jay and tells him that he's joining the program. A few days later, they move into a motel that is more affordable than their apartment, and things are getting better. Chris even takes his son to some basketball practice. The child wants to be a pro, but Chris thinks that that's not gonna happen. This remark breaks Christopher's heart, but this is when his dad tells him that he shouldn't let anyone stop him from chasing his dreams. The next few days are good for Chris, as he manages to sell a machine and get some cash. On his first day at the internship, his instructor tells them that they should be ready to do anything they can to get close to their clients. He gives them a book for the written exam and also makes it clear that whoever brings in more money in the next 6 months will be hired. Chris is excited and talking to one of his bosses after his first day, when he notices a homeless man carrying his machine. He runs after the guy like a madman once again, but this time he gets hit by a car in the middle of the street. He's okay, but he loses a shoe, and when he gets back to the office, people make fun of him. His son, on the other hand, is worried that he might get hurt if he keeps pushing himself like that. For the next few weeks, Chris does anything that his instructors ask him to do, and he tries to get as many clients as possible, all the while taking care of his son. He realizes that he doesn't have as much time as the other candidates, so he skips most people on his call sheet and goes straight to the top to book an appointment with a pension fund CEO named Walter. To his surprise, the guy agrees to meet him, but while Chris is leaving the office, his instructor asks him to park his car at a more suitable place. Chris is in a hurry, but he can't say no, so he tries to park the car as quickly as possible. But by the time he reaches Walter's office, the guy has already left. To make his life even more miserable, Chris even has to pay a parking ticket for his instructor's car. Still, he doesn't give up, and the next day he takes Christopher along as he goes to Walter's house, where he apologizes to Walter for missing the appointment. Walter is impressed by Chris's professionalism and asks him to join him and his son for a football game. Chris can't decline watching a football game from a VIP seat, so he agrees. During the game, he tries to ask Walter to invest in his firm, but it's clear that Walter can't really make a big trade with an intern. However, all is not lost, because Walter's friends are actually eager to work with Chris. Things are looking good for him, but it all changes when he finds out that the IRS took away all his savings because he failed to pay his taxes. Suddenly, Chris is broke and has no way of earning any money. He's sitting on the playground where Christopher is playing when he notices the homeless man carrying his scanner. He quickly runs over to the guy and grabs the machine. He then cleans it up before meeting with some doctors in order to sell it, but for some reason, the scanner isn't working. As if things aren't bad enough, their landlord also kicks them out of the motel for not paying their rent, and now Chris has nowhere to go. When even his friends refuse to help him, he takes Christopher to the train station, where they spend some time sitting on a bench. This is when he makes up a story about hiding from some imaginary enemies to convince his son that they need to hide inside the restroom for the night. However, Chris is unable to get any sleep since he has to hold the door shut so nobody can come in. The next morning, he gets off from work early and tries to find some shelter for his son. He learns about a Christian homeless shelter in the area and runs there with Christopher to stand in a long queue for homeless people. He even gets in a fight with a guy who tries to take his spot, but after all of this, he manages to find a place to stay for the two of them. That night, after tucking Christopher into bed, he checks the scanner to find out what's wrong with it. The next morning, he gets ready to pack up all his belongings to get back to work, where he acts as if nothing is wrong. This becomes his life now. He gets off early from work, picks up his son, and drags him to the homeless shelters, where the word of God brings him some much-needed peace. He uses dinner time to study for his exams, and on the day of the exam, he's one of the first candidates to finish it. However, when he tries to leave the building, his boss asks him to pay $5 to a cab driver, and just like that, Chris's life savings shrinks even more. He also fails to get into a homeless shelter that day, so the father-son duo spend the night in diners and trains. The next morning, he sells some blood plasma and uses the money to buy parts for his scanner. In the evening, he goes back to the shelter and spends the night. While he's putting Christopher to sleep, the kid asks if Jenny left them because of him. Chris assures his son that his mom left because of her own problems. Later that night, he finally manages to get the scanner working, and the next day, a doctor even buys it from him. This new influx of cash allows him to stay at a hotel, and they even spend a whole day playing around at the beach. Then on the final day of the internship, Jay tells Chris that he did a fantastic job by bringing in so many clients, and this makes Chris proud. However, he still hasn't gotten a job, and then the firm partners ask him to come into their office. He's extremely nervous because his entire life depends on this situation. Fortunately, his luck finally turns out, and he gets hired as a stockbroker. With tears in his eyes, he thanks his bosses for the opportunity, and then runs outside to let go of his emotions. He goes straight to the daycare and hugs his son to share his happiness. After that, the two of them again take a walk while talking about the little things like they used to before. The film ends by telling us that Chris eventually retired in 2006 as a multi-millionaire. If you enjoyed that recap, I got a good feeling that you'll like this one too. Click on the video on your screen for more.